As we approach the college football season, it is only right that we get started with our Big Ten SEC previews with the Michigan State Spartans. I'm going to be talking about the stars for this team, a few storylines, the major losses and additions to this roster, and then, of course, at the end, I'm going to talk about the X Factor game for this team and a record prediction. So let's hop right into it with the stars for this team. In the offensive group, we've got Jack Velling, a tight end, probably pass catcher number 2 for this team last year, 800 yards and 9 touchdowns over the last 2 seasons. Now, he follows his head coach, Jonathan Smith from Oregon State. I think he was a great option for Michigan State last year, and he's only going to see his role increase. And then to pair with him in the receiving core, we've got Nick Marsh, freshman wide receiver. Now he's a sophomore, but in his freshman season, 650 yards and 3 touchdowns. If it wasn't for Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, Ryan Williams, these big freshman names, I think we'd be talking about Nick Marsh and a potential breakout season for him in this upcoming year, in year 2 of this new offensive system. And then on the defensive side of the football, we've got 2 guys in the secondary that I want to talk about. Nakai Martinez, he is a returner from last year at safety, 51 tackles, 2 interceptions last season. He kind of plays a hybrid role where he can drop back in pass coverage, but also help in run defense as well. And then to pair with him in the secondary, Joshua Eaton, a transfer from Texas State. Over the last 2 years, he has had 13 pass deflections, and he's most likely going to be the guy that's going to be asked to stop the Jeremiah Smiths of the world. Can he do it? At the top of his game, I think he can slow those receivers down a bit, but is he a, all-American caliber player? No, absolutely not. But once again, a star of note for some of these other pedestrian games like Maryland and Iowa and whatnot. He's somebody to look out for with Michigan State. Moving on into the first storyline that I want to talk about, we have a bowl drought. Michigan State is approaching the longest bowl drought that they've had since the 1980s. Now, say what you want about Mark D'Antonio, but he made a bowl game 12 out of his 13 seasons as the Michigan State head coach, and they have yet to find that same success since he's been gone. I know it's only been a few years, and I understand that it's only year 2 under Jonathan Smith, but the Michigan State Spartan fans are hungry for something, and in my opinion, that is a 6-6 record minimum. Now, is he going to be on the hot seat if he can't get there? For next year, absolutely. But will he lose his job in year 2? I highly doubt it. Some of these programs like Michigan State aren't the big dogs. They're not the Michigans, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, the LSUs of the world. They don't have millions and millions of dollars to dole out to coaches to not coach their football team, especially given the scandals of the previous coaching staff. So I think this is going to be a solid year 2 for Jonathan Smith in terms of job security. I don't think he has to worry about that, but I do think the fans will be calling for immediate success in year 3 if they don't show signs of improvement, which is highly likely. So now moving into the losses and additions to this roster. The losses. Jordan Turner, linebacker, he gets signed as an undrafted free agent to the Broncos. He was the team's leading tackler last year, so definitely going to be missing him. I believe he was also the signal caller for the defense. You're going to have to reform the chemistry for that defense and getting those play calls in. That's a big loss. And then to pair with him on defense, Charles Brantley goes and transfers to Miami. 7 pass deflections, 3 interceptions from last season. That was your number 1 corner heading into this season. You lose him in the transfer portal. That's not a good sign, but you do replace him. Now moving into the additions of things, you do replace him with Jonathan Eaton, who I think is a comparable returning asset here, or not returning asset, but additional asset to this team. I think they can kind of be comped out there. And then on the offense, quite a few guys here that I want to talk about, 2 mainly. Wide receivers, Amari Kelly, who's actually from my hometown. Shout out to Amari Kelly. I played football with his older brother. 869 yards at Middle Tennessee. He was originally at Auburn, transfers to Middle Tennessee State, I believe. 869 yards, 4 touchdowns last season. He's going to be probably wide receiver number 3 for this team. And then to pair with him in the wide receiver room with Nick Marsh as well, Krishan McCray, who is a transfer from Kent State. Now, you want to talk about a playmaker. This guy had 40 catches, 705 yards, 9 touchdowns, averaging 17.6 yards per catch. Deep route specialist, not necessarily, but definitely a guy who can take the top off the defense. This wide receiver core is a major upgrade from last season. And then going back to the defensive side of the football, you've got Grady Kelly, who comes from Florida State, but originally has transferred from Colorado State, where he really shined. Now, he's played 38 total games as a player in college football, played 2 his redshirt freshman season, and then played 12 games at Colorado State in year 1, year 2, transfers to Florida State and plays all 12 games there. 6.5 tackles for loss as a defensive tackle in his last year at Colorado State. I'm pretty impressed with that. I think that he can be an impact player for this Michigan State front seven. He's going to be starting most likely, so that's a guy that I want to point out as a major addition to this roster. Now, going into my last 2 storylines, this offense, I think I've already said the word so far today, but pedestrian. Unbelievably bad offense last year. And pedestrian, honestly, is an overstatement. They were 126th in the country last year in scoring, only scoring 17.5 points per game. And that was even worse when it came to Big Ten conference play. They only scored 30 points one time versus a Big Ten opponent, and that was a home victory versus Iowa. I believe it was 32-30. Their offense was god-awful. They were below average in the run game, in the pass game, in pass protection, in interceptions thrown, in sack percentage. It didn't matter. They were awful. Now, Jonathan Smith, as an offensive guy, he's coached up many offenses. A former quarterback himself has got to show major improvements on the offensive side of the football this year if he wants credibility heading into year 3. And I definitely think that he is capable of doing that, especially with the major additions to this wide receiver core. The skill group overall has been upgraded in the offseason. So I think Michigan State can compete at a higher level offensively. Now, will they be, a top 50 offense? Probably not, because of their Big Ten opponents, but will they be better than 126th in scoring? I definitely think so. And then the last storyline that I want to talk about here is Michigan State, to me, needs a big win to carry some momentum into next year. Now, they were competitive versus Michigan last year. I don't necessarily think they will be this upcoming season, but overall, the schedule is not very kind to them. All of their quote-unquote winnable games are now being moved to on the road, and the home games are brutal. Michigan, Penn State, UCLA, even at home, is a tough game. So I think that this team is going to have to find an upset victory somewhere in the cards. Could it be a Penn State or a Michigan? Potentially, but pretty unlikely. Now, I'm looking at somewhere like at Indiana to kind of go in on the road. I think Indiana has Ohio State somewhere near that Michigan State game. Could they go in and pull off an upset? Sure. But is that going to happen? Let's hop into the record prediction. So first, I want to talk about the X Factor game. This, to me, is the game that pivots the entire season. Yes or no? Do they make a bowl game? And that is home for UCLA. Nico Iamaleava is going to be coming into this UCLA Bruins offense. He has to learn a whole new system. This is not a UCLA team that's stacked with talent like they were a few years ago. I do not think that Michigan State is that far off from competing with UCLA. And with the game being at home and a bowl game or a bowl game season on the line, this is the game to win. Now, can they do it? Let's hop into the record prediction. Starting with the first 3 games, I think they get off to a roaring start. They were competitive versus Boston College last year. That's game number 2. But first, Western Michigan at home, I think that's a win. We're talking about Maction right now. I do not think Western Michigan is up to par with Michigan State. Now, we've seen some Group of 5 teams come in and be very competitive versus Power 4 opponents, but I just don't see that happening as of right now. So, to me, that is a victory for Michigan State. And then pairing that with Boston College, I think that is also a win. I don't think Boston College is much better than last year. As a matter of fact, they lose some defensive key pieces. So I think Michigan State's offense can get off to a roll here in game number 2. They get a victory at home versus BC. Next, Youngstown State, an FCS school. Like I said, we've seen like North Dakota State come in and compete with Colorado. I do not think Youngstown State is on that level to compete with Michigan State. So 3 straight wins here for Michigan State to start the season, but then the going gets rough. at USC, at Nebraska. If these games were at home, I would give Michigan State a much better chance to compete. But I really think Nebraska has one of the best home field advantages in the Big Ten. USC, although they were disappointing last year, they were very competitive with teams like Penn State, and I think they've improved their roster a little bit heading into this season. I think both of those games are losses. And then the X Factor game, UCLA. I look at the quarterback-to-quarterback matchup, and I like Nico far more. So I think UCLA, even though it's on the road, can come in and beat Michigan State here. So now 3 straight losses. And then the gauntlet begins. At Indiana, home for Michigan. At Minnesota, home for Penn State. At Iowa. 5 straight losses, in my opinion. Not only are all 5 of these teams better than Michigan State talent-wise, but 3 of those games are on the road at Iowa, at Minnesota, at Indiana. Those are the games that could be more competitive for Michigan State. But I think Michigan, Big Brother, Penn State, both far outclass Michigan State in talent. Once again, can they win any of those 5 games? Absolutely. But the probability of them winning those games, each and every one of them, is less than 50%. I simply think that a home field advantage mixture with talent has to factor in somehow. And that's why I have 5 straight losses there in those 5 games, which actually makes it 8 straight losses across the season, heading into their last game versus Maryland. Now, this is technically a quote-unquote neutral site game, but I believe it's played at Ford Field in Detroit, so it's a home game. And I think Michigan State in the cold or in the net neutral weather environment can absolutely beat Maryland here. Now, this Maryland roster with their coaching staff probably will be on the outs heading into the latter part of the season. So I think Michigan State can somehow form some momentum here on the last game of the season and get a victory there. So record prediction-wise, I have them going 4-8. This is not a step-up year for Jonathan Smith, and it's simply because this schedule is much tougher than it was last year. Now, once again, can they win some of these games? Absolutely. I would not be shocked at all. But will they get to 6 wins? I highly doubt it. But let me know what you think of Michigan State's season in the comments. Will this roster, especially offensively, make major improvements under Jonathan Smith? And will he be on the hot seat for year 3 next season? I think the answer to those questions are all in some shape, way, or form yes. So thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you leave a like, comment, and be sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.